The silence meter. Meninos de Altamira case. Get in. Yeah, it's humid tonight. Where to? We're going somewhere you've probably never heard of. Altamira, deep in the Amazon, Pará state, western Brazil. If you look it up on a map, it sits right in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by forests, cut by rivers, far from everything. July 28, 2019. A prison riot broke out at the Altamira Regional Recovery Center. That sounds clinical, bureaucratic, like something you'd hear on a news ticker and forget by morning. But here's what actually happened. 17 inmates were killed, not in a fight, not in crossfire. They were massacred, beheaded, burned, mutilated. 16 of them were decapitated in a Brazilian prison in broad daylight over the course of 5 hours, while guards watched from outside the walls. But here's the thing that makes this case more than just a prison riot statistic. The victims weren't random. They were specifically targeted. Young men, boys, some of them, teenagers who'd been placed in that prison by a system that was supposed to protect them, and they were slaughtered by a rival gang that controlled the facility. A facility the government knew was dangerous. A facility that had been reported, flagged, warned about for years. Tonight we're going to Altamira. We're going inside a prison that became a slaughterhouse. We're going to talk about what happens when the state abandons its most vulnerable and calls it justice. You buckled in? Good, because this one doesn't end with accountability. It ends with a body count and a system that looked the other way. Let me tell you about the Meninos de Altamira, the boys of Altamira, and the night Brazil's prison system revealed its true face. Statistical context. The Brazilian prison system. To understand why Altamira happened, we need to look at the numbers. Brazil's incarceration rates and demographics show a clear pattern of systemic pressure. Category data. Statistics. Total prison population. Approximately 835,000 inmates, third largest in the world. System capacity designed for roughly 470,000 people. Overcrowding rate approximately 175%, nearly 2 people for every 1 space. Racial demographics. 67.5% of the prison population is black or Pardo, mixed race, compared to 56% of the general population. Legal status approximately 44. 7% of inmates are provisional prisoner, awaiting trial, not yet convicted. Age group, over 50% of inmates are between the ages of 18 and 29. Body of the story. Altamira. The city. Picture this. You're deep in the Amazon. The air is thick. The river is wide and brown and powerful. Altamira is a city of about 120,000 people in Pará state, one of the largest municipalities in the world by land area, but most of it is forest. It's a city that grew fast and chaotic during the construction of the Belo Monte hydroelectric dam. Workers flooded in. Crime followed. Infrastructure didn't keep up. By the late 2010s, Altamira had one of the highest homicide rates in Brazil, which is saying something. And at the center of that violence, the prison. The Centro de Recuperação Regional de Altamira. Officially, a regional recovery center, a rehabilitation facility. In reality, an overcrowded, understaffed, gang-controlled nightmare. Capacity, approximately 200 inmates. Actual population on July 28, 2019, over 300, 50% over capacity. The prison had 2 wings, and here's the critical detail. Each wing was controlled by a different criminal faction. One wing, Comando Classe A, a local gang. Other wing, Comando Vermelho, one of Brazil's most powerful criminal organizations, based in Rio de Janeiro. 2 rival gangs, separated by walls that weren't thick enough, guards who were outnumbered and, according to reports, largely ceded internal control to the gangs themselves. This was the situation. Everyone knew it. Prison administrators knew it. State government knew it. Human rights organizations had reported it. And nothing changed. July 28, 2019. The massacre. Sunday morning, around 7 a.m. Inmates in the Comando Vermelho wing broke through the wall separating them from the Comando Class A wing. armed, organized, prepared. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. What followed was 5 hours of systematic violence. 16 members of the rival gang were beheaded. One more died of suffocation from smoke. The attackers set fire to cells. 17 dead in total. Some of the victims were teenagers, young men placed in adult facilities because the juvenile system was full. The bodies were mutilated. Some were burned. Some were decapitated and the heads displayed. A deliberate act of terror and domination. For 5 hours, this happened. Guards did not enter the facility. The state was not notified immediately. By the time external forces arrived and the situation was controlled, 17 people were dead. The response: Brazil woke up to the news on Monday morning. Images that couldn't be unseen. Headlines that didn't seem real. The state government of Pará expressed regret. The federal government called for investigations. Human rights organizations called it what it was: a massacre, enabled by state negligence, predictable, preventable. Because here's the thing, this wasn't the first time. Brazil's prison crisis. To understand Altamira, you need to understand Brazil's prison system. Brazil has the third largest prison population in the world, over 800,000 people incarcerated. Facilities designed for 400,000. That's not a typo. Twice the capacity. Everywhere. Systematically. And in that overcrowding, power vacuums form. Gangs step in, provide order, provide protection, in exchange for loyalty and control. The state, which can't or won't adequately fund and staff these facilities, cedes that control. And then when the gangs turn on each other, people die. This has happened over and over in Brazil. January 2017, Manaus. Over 56 inmates killed in a prison riot. January 2017, Roraima. 33 killed. January 2017, Amazonas. Over 30 killed. All in the same month. All following the same pattern. Who were the victims? This is the part that haunts. 17 people died in Altamira. The media initially covered it as a gang conflict, implying that the victims were criminals and therefore somehow less deserving of horror. But who were these people? Some were convicted of serious crimes, yes, but some were awaiting trial, not yet convicted of anything. Some were teenagers, minors, who should never have been in an adult facility. Some were there for minor offenses, caught up in a system that had no alternative for them. They had names, families, mothers who got phone calls on Monday morning. They were human beings placed in a facility that the state knew was a death trap, and the state left them there. That's not justice. That's abandonment. The investigation, federal and state investigations, were launched. They concluded what everyone already knew. The prison was catastrophically overcrowded. The rival gang situation had been flagged repeatedly. Security was inadequate. The attack was organized and premeditated. Guards failed to intervene. Members of the attacking gang, Commando Vermelho members, were identified and charged. Some were transferred to higher security facilities. Some faced additional charges. But here's the question nobody wanted to answer. Who is responsible for the conditions that made this possible? Which governor? Which prison administrator? Which federal official? Who made the decisions, year after year, to underfund, overcrowd, and ignore these facilities? And what happened to them? Nothing. No administrator was charged. No government official faced consequences. The investigation focused on the gang members who wielded the knives, not the system that handed them the keys. The families. 17 families got phone calls. Mothers, fathers, siblings, partners. Some came to Altamira to claim bodies. Some couldn't afford to travel. Some couldn't identify remains because of the condition of the bodies. One mother, her name withheld by her request in most reports, gave an interview to a local journalist. She said her son was 19, had been in prison for 8 months, awaiting trial on a theft charge. She said she called the prison every week. She said she'd reported that her son was scared, that the situation was dangerous. She said nobody listened. She said she identified her son by a tattoo on his arm, because that was all that was left. That's the Meninos de Altamira, not a statistic. a 19-year-old, identified by a tattoo, while the officials who left him in that prison went home to their families. Theories and analysis. Theory 1. This was purely a gang war. Two rival factions. One attacked the other. Criminal on criminal violence. The state's responsibility is limited. Problem. The state created the conditions. Putting rival gang members in the same overcrowded facility is foreseeably lethal. Theory 2. State negligence as complicity. The government knew. Reports existed. They didn't act because the people dying were poor, marginalized, and incarcerated. The state's inaction wasn't passive, it was a choice. Theory 3. Systemic dehumanization. Brazil's prison crisis is the result of decades of policy, tough-on-crime rhetoric, racial and class disparities, and a narrative that sees prisoners as less than human. Altamira happened because of the system. Theory 4. The gang expansion narrative. Comando Vermelho was eliminating local competition to establish dominance in the Amazon. The state essentially handed CV a venue for expansion by ceding control of the facility. The unanswered questions: who is accountable for the conditions that enabled this? Why were minors in an adult facility? Why were rival gang members housed together? What has changed since July 2019? Closing. We're here. I've been driving through the Amazon tonight in my head, thinking about 17 people who woke up on July 28, 2019, and didn't survive the day. Some of them were dangerous men, members of criminal organizations. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but some of them were kids. Some were awaiting trial. Some were there for reasons that had nothing to do with gang warfare, and all of them were placed, by the state, in a facility that was a known death trap. The men who swung the weapons were caught, but the officials who underfunded that prison? Free. The administrators who ignored the warnings? Free. The politicians who built careers on tough-on-crime rhetoric while cutting prison budgets? Still in office. 17 people died in 5 hours, and Brazil moved on within a week. Because it always does. Because when the victims are poor, black, incarcerated, the outrage has a shorter half-life. The meter's off. The Amazon is quiet tonight, but in Altamira, there are 17 graves and 17 families who got the worst phone call of their lives, and a system that is unchanged, waiting for the next riot, the next massacre, the next 17. There's an ancient principle that says even the guilty deserve dignity. That imprisonment is a removal of freedom, not of humanity. That how a society treats its prisoners reveals the true character of that society. Brazil's prisons reveal something uncomfortable. They reveal a society that has decided certain lives are disposable, that poor lives, black lives, and incarcerated lives don't require the same protection as others. There's a warning woven into existence, that those who show no mercy will receive none, that justice isn't selective. That accountability doesn't stop at prison walls. The men who killed in Altamira will face justice for what they did. But what about the men who built the condition? Ancient wisdom tells us that those in authority carry a heavier burden. That power without accountability is corruption. I think about the mother who identified her son by a tattoo on his arm. A 19-year-old, 8 months awaiting trial. A theft charge. She called every week. Reported that he was scared. Nobody listened. What do you say to her? Her son's name appears in a report filed with the state of Pará. And the official who left her son in that prison? He's still working. There's a truth in ancient wisdom, that the blood of the innocent cries out, that it doesn't go unanswered forever, that even when human systems fail, there is a higher accounting. I hold on to that, not because it brings comfort now, but because the alternative, that 17 people died for nothing. Hey, thanks for riding with me through the Amazon tonight. This one isn't about a single criminal, a single crime. It's about a system that is killing people right now, in Brazilian prisons. If this case affected you, if you're angry that 17 people died in 5 hours while guards stood outside, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more stories that expose systemic failure. Drop a comment. Tell me what you think. Is this inevitable in a system this broken? What should change? I read every one. Share this with someone who cares about criminal justice and human rights. These 17 people had names, had families, had lives. They deserved better than what they got. Next case, new story, same cab. Until then, remember that justice isn't selective, or it isn't justice at all.